Hello and welcome to the Apex podcast. So this is episode number 7 and I'm luckily joined by a good friend of mine, Daragh Allen. Cheers, Daragh. Thank you for jumping on, man.
No problem at all. Been a while.
Yeah,
How are you?
it's been a while since we sat down and chatted. I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, all is well. Settling in now over in Manchester. Um, yeah, loving it.
Awesome. So give me a little bit of an introduction into who you are.
So same as last time, still doing the same stuff. Online coaching full time. I think last time we spoke, I was just out of competition prep, and now kind of getting ready for it again. So I'm junior bodybuilder, online coach, working with Joe Jeffrey, and yeah, just geeking out on everything kind of human phys and science related shit.
just fun stuff. Like
Well, error definition of fun.
yeah, that's Paul texted me yesterday after I put up my story and he was like, have you ever tried heroin and cocaine? Your definition of fun is off. Okay, right. So today the plan of action is to talk about setting up a successful fat loss phase and kind of everything that goes into that. So I suspect that we can chat about this for quite a while. But we're going to just kind of like try and have this like as applicable and as kind of bullet point take homey as possible. I'm sure we're going to rant off anyway. But anyway, let's get stuck into things. Okay, so I don't care about the perfect macronutrient ratio or the perfect resistance profile until I know that somebody can adhere and actually stick to things and actually enjoy sticking to things as well. So that's where we're going to start. It is truly the most important factor is our ability to actually do the stuff we talk about doing, and it's difficult.
Yeah.
So, Daragh, how do we go about starting to improve this adherence stuff?
So when we are talking about, let's say, with a new client or with ourselves, the first thing we kind of need to do is understand like our fundamental or subconscious why in terms of why we're actually doing what we're doing. How much does that goal actually mean to us? Um, and then I suppose building the confidence up until that by accomplishing potentially smaller tasks along the way. Um, but yeah, as I said, like if we're not able to adhere to a plan, it doesn't matter what the actual split is with regards to kind of your training, your nutrition, etc. All that is out the window if it's not consistent. So with adherence, yeah, there's so many different levels to this potentially. Like we're talking about like the consistency with regards to your food, your training, but also how do we actually deal with other things that fluctuate on a day-by-day basis. So not just a perfect week, but how well do you actually deal with when something goes awry, when something skews you, when something throws you off track? How do you actually deal with any potential speed bumps, etc., that come up, which I'm sure many people have had like an abundance of over the last few
Yeah,
months.
like
Years.
that's actually something that I use in my check-in sheet. It's like, so the question I have is, how well did we handle stress and adversity this week? And kind of the reason I have it like the question set up like that is because these things are inevitable. Somebody's going to piss you off. Something is going to get in your way. You're going to be underslept, stressed out, hungry. All of these things are going to lead to you not wanting to stick to things, and it's like these things aren't going to go away, and it's our ability to deal with these things. So that's kind of exactly what we're touching on there. So how do we? Because you are like one of the most kind of disciplined people I know, and I also don't believe that it's always been the case. So I do believe that this is something that is kind of trained and practiced. So
Yeah.
teach me.
Right. So from like you'll have anecdotal experience of any of the people who like talk about discipline to any high degree, and it's the same thing in the literature that you will see in studies in books. that it comes down to graded exposure. So actually putting yourself in some of these less than ideal circumstances, in a way that is kind of digestible and allows you to potentially deal with them. So as I said before, building the confidence over these smaller tasks, and yeah, just developing that over a whatever time frame. But again, we have to again look back to, right, is the goal actually worthwhile? Is it worth our time to actually invest? Are we willing to make these sacrifices that we have to, the inevitable sacrifices, or just put up with the monotonous daily tasks? Does the goal, is the goal big enough for us, or do we just genuinely enjoy the process of it? If the answer to either of them is no, then you need to kind of go back to the drawing board.
Yeah, I think like that is pretty damn perfect there, where it's like our capacity to do things is based on our skill at these things. And these skills take practice, but we also need to kind of meet ourselves where we're currently at, and sometimes that's embarrassingly slow, or like embarrassingly low,
Yeah.
where like we have, in order for us to actually stick to things, like we have to like ask so very little of ourselves. But with that, and like if we ask like something very very small of yourself, and you do that, and then you start to build this belief that, oh shit, when I'm smart with what I plan for myself, I can actually stick to things. And then
Yeah.
we can over time, like as you said, like introduce like this graded exposure, or this like anti-fragility, where we with practice we get comfortable in these situations. And I suppose there's so much that we could speak about here. Like here, I actually would have loved to record the full podcast on adherence now, because there's a lot that goes into it. No, actually, do you know what? We'll leave that for another episode, because I'm just like sitting here going, oh, so much to touch on. Right. Okay, so back to what people are here for, and that is this fat loss. Okay, so we are planning a fat loss phase. It's like we're about to, sometime over the next 6 months, like we're going to do a 12 or 16 week fat loss phase. It's like, what do we need to do prior? Yeah.
Cool. So out the gate, we're looking at, as I said, once we establish adherence over a specific time frame, and we have this self-confidence and we know that we're able to execute these tasks, simply like calling it a fat loss phase is literally just an extension of those previous like mesocycles prior to it. You know what I mean? It's just a matter of rinse and repeating these with this overarching goal that is further down the line, and we're not getting that instant gratification that like we as humans are so innately used to. And yeah, again, I think everything that we'll say will circle back to that initial point of what is your why, what's the main reason you're doing it, how big of a goal is it for you. But then when we're looking at like planning the phase itself, we need to have a set deadline, we need to have a set structure. Now again, everything will be subject to change. Like we have to be flexible and plastic in our approaches to these, because obviously, as I said, we will have these imperfect circumstances that we have to be able to adapt to. So allocating a timeline that is going to be manageable but allows for some kind of flexibility, and developing that kind of confidence and the nailing of the basics in the previous phases.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely perfect. Like, yeah, I've very little to add there. I think just the only thing being, it's like, in order for us to get into a fat loss phase, like we have to stop heading in the direction that we were once heading. It's like if you're after gaining 5 kilos over the last year, it's like you're heading upwards. Like for us to change things,
We
it's
need
like,
to slow that down and then bring it back down.
yeah, exactly. Like we need to find a position where you're like, if you're somebody who's been gaining weight and then you stop gaining weight, like that's progress. Like, that is actually progress towards your fat loss goal. It
We're
doesn't.
not going to go from reverse into third gear. You know what I mean? Like when you're driving a car, you have to stop, you have to put it into neutral, you have to go into first gear and then work your way back up through the gears. You're not going to go reversing downhill 30 kilometers an hour and then all of a sudden whacking into fifth and expect the clutch to hold up. It's not going to happen. So that's probably as good of an analogy as we can get with that. So yeah, that's definitely like, again, a form of progress by not going away from where we want to be. Yeah.
Okay, so how do we create this deficit? Like, what is? I suspect that we have pretty much like identical opinions here. It's like you have somebody at maintenance, and week one of the deficit is like, no, let's not call it week one. Let's just call it like, how are you creating your deficit as a whole?
Person dependent. If that person is very, very high on food, let's say it's with a dude trying to put on muscle tissue and are at this point of just excessive satiety and enjoying their food, it makes to pull that down first. It's a no-brainer. Make like everything we have to do, all of our decision making has to be client centered. You know what I mean? We have to see what's going to be most sustainable for them. So, if that's the case, then yeah, cool. If we're at a place where, let's say, we're coming out of a recovery phase for whatever reason, we're coming out of a deload, it could just be a matter of bringing up our expenditure slightly. And more often than not, that should be done through training. Like this is probably where my bias lets me down and where I have a proclivity to saying potentially things out of context. But I think with the vast majority of people, their training can always improve. Like, you can always train that little bit harder, and I just think pushing people in that direction will 9 times out of 10 yield a better response.
Yeah, actually, that's like, because that's one of the things that we're going to touch on a little bit more in regards to training. But yes, if we can get people up to a point where they're like they're walking a tightrope of what we might call like pretty perfect training, and like from there being like, okay, right, how am I going to create this deficit? As you said, if somebody's on high food already, it's like, okay, well, I want them to be comfortable, so let's pull things down. I think like something that I will do with people is like sit down and be like, okay, right, let's say that we are 16 weeks into this fat loss phase. Is like, what can I expect of you then? It's like, where do we have to go? Like, if you're too busy for us to be able to do 15,000 steps, or you're too busy for us to do like 30 minutes of cardio 3 times a week, it's like, okay, I'm not sure if you can hear that dog. It's a little bit annoying. So that's where we will. That's how I will kind of start, and then from there, it's like there is no protocol. It's like there's no. I'm not like, okay, right, well, I have to add cardio this week, or I have to decrease food this week. Usually, sorry.
There's no blueprints. There's so many different cards that we can play, but also we have to consider that every card we do play is perishable. So the minute that you ramp their steps up to, let's say they move from 10,000 to 12,000 steps a day, that's essentially their new maintenance. Even though yes, they are still in a diet, you're not going to get that same effect by then bringing it back up to 12,000 because that's where they're currently at. You know what I mean? So if you do all that stuff straight out the gate, then you're 8 weeks into diet phase, fat loss slows down, etc. What card do we have to play? Well, it's probably pull their food down more, but okay, their sleep is starting to take a hit, their performance is definitely taking a hit. How will pulling their food down more be of any use? It probably, in that case, it's probably going to do more harm than good. So it's about being somewhat sustainable, but also understanding how many different things you have to play and what is the most suitable at that phase or that period within the diet phase.
Yeah, and then like two big things that I'm sure we both do as well is just like having carbohydrate a touch higher on training days. Yeah. Just like we don't need, or having carbohydrate, but also total calories higher on training days, as we don't need to be like we want to be able to have our nutrition periodized around our training for the minute potential benefits that we may get from doing that. it's not something that we're going to leave on the table. But again, it's like whatever adherence allows. If people have to keep calories consistent across the day because or across the week because it allows them to adhere, then cool, that's what we're doing.
Yeah, or if you have, let's say, towards that tail end, like obviously, I said it's not going to be when we have a bias of carbohydrates, let's say pre-workout for an ergogenic aid to increase performance. If that's at the expense of, like, it's not going to increase their performance per se. It will more than likely just reduce how much the performance is going to drop off. It's going to reduce how much the performance is going to decrease. Um, but if that is at the expense of someone who is sleeping shit, who's training first thing in the morning, and they have a long ass day, are you going to try to get them to eat their food in early? No, probably not. It's not going to be sustainable, and that's going to potentially lead to inadherence further down the line, or again poor quality sleep because they're going to bed absolutely starving.
So. Yeah, so let's not do that. Okay, so let's go straight into training there. So how do we set up our training in a deficit? So we start doing our higher reps to tone the muscle, of course.
Yeah, no, we're not going to do that. Like, I try to keep this as simple as possible and just say whatever built the tissue will keep the tissue. So you want to maintain as much stimulus as much. One thing as well, like, yes, it's brilliant to like obsess over the logbook and to be quantitative in your training and to eke out these progressions. But also, like, there is a qualitative component whereby if you are like fatigued and you're just going through the motions, and you're doing whatever you can to try and match those numbers, then it may start doing more harm than good. You know what I mean? So, like, actually coming out of a session, not just logging down the numbers. Now, obviously, this is going to sound very meticulous and over the top, but like actually reflecting on a set and say, like, did that feel the way it used to? I mean, like, am I still feeling that same sensation in the same body parts as I used to? No. If not, then why not? We'll have this typically with like an RDL where, like, in the off season, yeah, you might feel pretty good engagement through hamstrings, glutes, erectors, but then come the tail end of a diet phase, all you just feel is just exhausted and battered. You know what I mean? It's just doing more damage towards your CNS, your central nervous system, than it is with regards to actual muscular tension. And that is, muscular tension is still going to be the main kind of objective goal within your resistance training. Like, resistance training shouldn't really be, this might kind of ruffle up a few hairs, but like resistance training shouldn't be a fat loss tool. It's not really a means of expending calories. It's to maintain tissue and to maintain a good level of BMO, which will then allow you to create a larger deficit.
Yeah, like especially like anybody who resistance trains, or yeah, I think everybody who listens to this is somebody who's looking to look better, not just to lose weight. And if we're trying to look better, then muscle is gold. And the way we set up our training is to continue to gain muscle or to maintain muscle. And the means by which we go about doing that is like, as you said, like even in a surplus day, like not being married to the logbook is like pretty damn important, because you can, if you're doing a set of 12 and it's meant to be a 4-second negative, it's like, give yourself 6 weeks on that program and that 4-second negative is going to turn into a 2. It's me. It's me. Like I do it, and I'd be like quite good at these things. I'm quite skilled at it. So like taking it with a pinch of salt as well.
Sometimes I'll actually periodize in for myself and some clients just a reset week, even if they don't need a deload. I'll just be like, right, this week I just want you to actually just like, I think Luke Hoffman mentioned kind of like internally focused back off sets, where you can actually write that as a cue. And that can be a very, very useful tool. But I'll just usually say like a full week reset, maybe pull off a set from each exercise and just try to get as much as you can from the same numbers. So do not take an extra rep, do not change the weight, but try to get as much of a pump as possible from that.
Yeah, I use, and that's completely unrelated, but I'll use them on certain movements. Like I'll use them with like A1 of like a pull day, a lat movement, or I'll use them as like A1 on it, like a hip thrust, with the goal being just like get some glute contractions out of them, and we're going to go train properly in a split squat or something like that. But anyway, back to where we were. Yeah, so training wise, your recovery capacity is diminished, meaning you need to adjust your training appropriately. And like within a certain extent, being able to judge where your strength is at is going to be one of the biggest indicators of whether you're recovering and benefiting from training volume. So there's going to be certain movements across a training block that you're going to be able to, like, that are going to be easier to monitor progress on than others. So like let's say, for example, a RDL here. It's like you know what your execution should look like, especially what, like, if you're recording video feedback for your coaching stuff as well. It's like keeping that consistent and allowing for that big movement to be a big indicator of whether strength progress or strength is decreasing or increasing, and we're going to have to manipulate training volume based on that RDL, let's say. A little bit too difficult to do it on other movements, but picking like a big one, like a back squat or an RDL or something like that, like you have to keep your technique honest. And then if we have to pull training volume down, then we do. Another thing that I will do is, like, usually when I start a training block, I will like periodize the training volume upwards. If they're at maintenance or in a surplus, I won't do that. I won't do that in a deficit.
Okay. Yeah.
So, do you have any?
Sometimes it may be useful. You know what I mean? It's like, I wouldn't say, like, again, we may actually have different thoughts for once, but sometimes, like, I may actually do that. You know what I mean? Move it up, because yes, you're in a deficit, but like, it's not a severe deficit. You know what I mean? Unless you're towards the tail end where I'm just like, right, that's when I'm actually chopping off sets. I'm saying, right, it's just tension based. But like sometimes earlier on, like, as I said, we can still create more of a deficit through more of a stimulus through training. Like, I know it's a very kind of popular word. It's kind of like a soundbite, and you'll have like different opinions on it. But like a recomp phase, where you will like potentially undergo both hypertrophy and lipolysis simultaneously. Like, yes, it can be done, but like your training needs to reflect that. So it might be a matter of like tapering up volume in certain body parts and tapering it down elsewhere, so that you're still within that recovery capacity.
Yeah, I like that. I know. I think that's a good idea. No, and that's one thing that I didn't touch on there. It's like it's the who here. It's like who are we speaking about? It's like,
yeah. So like, for an example, that's what I'm doing. One of my clients who's I think he's about 7 weeks out now from his first show, and like, again, it's just a matter of like bringing up lagging body parts, like having his higher calorie days. So like carb cycling, which is another thing we could potentially touch on, within a fat loss phase. But again, bias and volume and total caloric intake around specific body parts. Like, will it make a massive difference? No. But when you're competing, you're only looking for that 1, 2, 3% difference.
yeah, awesome. Okay, so let's talk about this carb cycling.
Yeah. So it's just a means by which you're going to potentially bias your total intake, caloric intake. Again, but carb cycling, we should actually probably just call it calorie cycling, because again, like, all macronutrients are important here. It's not a matter of like depleting and refueling glycogen. It's not any added benefit. It's just, again, it's more so psychological and performance based. So we'll move them up on days that we potentially need more. For someone doing shift work, that could be on their shift days. We could dig a little bit deeper when they're not working. Again, we're talking about sustainability. But when like the visual aesthetic may be the goal, as I said, it could be on particular training days where we'll have, like, I know the anecdote was saying like an extra 100 gram of carb on leg days, which is like very kind of old school meathead approach, but like it's a more taxing training session. And then, as I said, with one of the other clients, that might be on a push day, because that's a body part that we need to kind of facilitate and promote a little bit more muscular fullness. We don't want to risk running him too flat for too long. But anyway, yeah, so basically it's just a matter of, typically you'll have high, medium and low days, where you'll have, like we had done with a training and non-training day, we'll probably just pull that down and maybe have like 3 days low calorie, and 2 days moderate, and then 2 days high calorie. And you can just again adjust it to preference based on the individual in front of you.
Yeah, I quite like to like the population that we coach are slightly different, being that yours are like, would you agree that the majority of them are very kind of physique athlete based?
Most of them, yeah,
Yeah,
they're definitely moving that way.
yeah. As opposed to with me, I just kind of I have a massive range of clients. It's so like it,
Still have
so
a good variety, but so I'm trying to
sorry.
push. So I still have a good kind of variety within my demographic, but it's definitely like one of the fields where I'm more enthusiastic about.
Yeah, yeah. That's kind of what I meant. That's what you'll be doing in like 5, 6 years time. It will be very much like bodybuilding based.
Yeah, fingers
Um.
crossed.
Okay, so yeah, sorry. What I was just saying was like how I might set things up is like, okay, right, we're gonna set your week up where you have a lower body session or a leg pull session on a Saturday. It's like where you get to couple this higher food with your day off. Um, and sometimes like that in itself might allow people to adhere better. Again, like that's really all I care about here is just like, okay, what can we do in order to have things adhered to?
Yeah.
Um, okay, so what are diet breaks?
So diet breaks, again, depends on the length of the goal and how much we actually have allocated ourselves. They are definitely very useful, more so with people who have a significant amount of adipose tissue to lose, where you can kind of go in these shorter blocks and potentially push things a little bit more aggressively, and then also allowing them to reacclimate to their so-called maintenance or to their actual maintenance, um, so that they can actually come out of that dieting phase and maintain it. You know what I mean? Like it's definitely something I feel as a coach. If I had a client who finished up with me and regained a lot of weight, I would still look introspectively and say, right, what did I do wrong there? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It is like so many coaches are results based, and yes, obviously that's like how business works, but like you still have to be able to. You have to have the confidence that they'll be able to keep it with them. You know what I mean? You don't want to see someone just undo all the hard work you've done together.
Absolutely, and this is something we're gonna speak about in part two of this episode, part two of this
Yeah.
podcast is just like, okay, what do we have to do in order to maintain this fat loss after we get there? Um, and it's because it's difficult, but there is like, I suppose we can use the saying that success leaves clues and cues even, and not clues. And there's a couple of things that we can take from people who we know have been like very successful with things in the past. But yeah, we're gonna touch on that a little bit later towards the end. Okay. Yeah, so that would be very very much my exact kind of feelings here as well. I don't necessarily believe that they're like very necessary. Like we're going to see, we do definitely see some like metabolic down regulation in like relation to how aggressive we make this deficit. So we are going to see our like our knees come down and stuff as well. It's like if you were to stick me in like or well, like actually when Paul stuck me in this aggressive deficit where I'm like, the first thing I do is I just like I slog around the house. It's like I sit down to wee. It's like it's like all of these things. Like my expenditure throughout the day like decreases big time. Um, like I'm not sure if you noticed, but how much I speak with my hands. It's like give me
That's
another
hard.
give me another 4 weeks in the deficit, and I'll just be sitting there like I can barely speak with my mouth.
Yeah, yeah, you definitely get that towards the tail end of prep where you're just like someone talks and you know they have good intentions, but you're just like it's so much effort that you're trying to give them like a one word answer, and just like you're trying to end the conversation as soon as possible.
Yeah,
Also,
That's
again,
one.
I'm not trying to put anyone off fat loss phase. This is like this towards the very end of a very aggressive diet. But yeah. So when we're so when we're talking about like the diet break itself, yeah, like as you've said, there will be hormonal adaptations. We will have yeah, metabolic adaptations. But also like it takes time to actually revert them back up. So 90% of the time, what we're doing with a diet break is more psychological than physiological. It's not a matter of like bumping their RMR back up and increasing fucking leptin. Like that's not going to happen over 3-4 day refeeds. Like that takes weeks of not just a reduced deficit, but actual a caloric surplus.
Especially
so
like, especially if we look at like the so we have like a non-homeostatic and homeostatic mechanisms for like appetite regulation, and some of these things like you pretty much need, like you need body fat in order for to see that it decrease in appetite decrease in appetite. So we're going to touch on that in a while as well. It's just like, okay, there is some things that we're going to have to do food decision wise in order to handle our increased appetite that when we get leaner.
Yeah, so it will be somewhat inevitable, you know what I mean? That's when you'll have people having these weird diet hacks and potentially develop kind of food pathologies. But then also like a counter to that is like a lot of food and eating pathologies are typically developed prior to the diet phase itself. You know what I mean? Like if you actually have someone who goes through a pretty constructive gaining phase, you're going to be able to build their food up pretty high so that when they diet down, they don't need to pull down that low. And if they don't need to pull down that low, they're not going to develop these weirder tendencies. Also, like, I'm not sure if we're going to touch on it here in part 2, but then we also have potentially like a cheat meal or an off-plan meal, but actually integrating a level of flexibility that allows the client to adhere over a sustained time frame is fucking gold. You know what I mean? If you can put them through a gaining phase where like food focus is reduced so much, also that food focus will remain pretty low. Like on the flip side, when you actually pull their food down.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so we're going, as we said, we're going to chop this up into 2 parts, just to keep things like as we can speak more, and we feel like maybe we're rushing ourselves if we don't split it up into 2 parts. I think you'll agree there. It's a better plan. So just for anybody who isn't going to listen to the second part, Daragh, where can we hire you for coaching? Where can we follow you on Instagram? Where can we see it in the nip?
So Instagram is definitely my go-to. It's pretty much everything I run everything through. So that will be Dallin_optimal coaching. Bit of a nuisance. I kind of want to change it, but yeah, DALLEN. So yeah, you can look at that there. Look at my own progress if for some reason that is of interest to you. See what I'm doing with clients, photo shoot prep, any questions that you have. I'm trying to be a little bit more interactive and active on it, but it's not really my forte at the moment. I'll be very responsive to DMs and I'll go through phases where I'll actually be active on stories, but some of them are few and far between.
Yeah, you're just busy coaching, I suppose, doing what your job is, as opposed to
enjoying it. You know what I mean? Like I really enjoy going down these rabbit holes and reading research papers and talking to you about random shit. Again, a lot of people say like your business is your social media, and like to an extent, yes, but like you're being hired by your current clients, not your like social media is going to be your advertisement. It's not actually your job.
Yeah, and yeah, your ability to like maintain clientele as well, because you have the education to bring them through their like a journey themselves, where it's like, okay, like we have layers that we can add onto this, and it's like not only do we have layers for 12 weeks, it's like we have pretty much layers for 6-7 years. And it just makes it like then again, you focus on keeping your clients as opposed to getting new ones.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. Cheers, Daragh. Thank you so much.
Right. No problem. See you soon.